In today's video, we are going to be building out one of the most effective sales agents I've had the pleasure of running. And in this video, I'll be giving you a glimpse behind the curtain on what makes this particular agent so effective, and most importantly, how to set it up yourself. Additionally, I'll be going through some bonus material at the end of the video, including Vapi's introduction to a few new voicemail detection providers, as well as white labeling your Vapi agent dashboard and more. There's a lot to get through this video, so without further ado, let's jump into it. In front of us here are 4 core logic flows that handle the entirety of this agent's operation. We have the trigger workflow here, as well as, if you're familiar with my last video, this appointment booking side of things. We also have an Airtable script integration here, which I'll talk as a bonus piece at the end of the video. But most importantly, we have this callback logic. So in the event a call is not answered, which happens a lot of the times with outbound sales, we need to be able to call back immediately and then the following day after, therefore increasing the overall effectiveness of not only just pickup rates, but also conversion rates. But before we get into setting all this up yourself, let's quickly jump into a demo of how this operates. Picture we have a CRM set up on Airtable with our lead details here. We have a call status here, TBC or to be called. What we're gonna do here is show you a demo of everything working here, starting with initializing a call and distributing our agent to a lead list. We'll go ahead and distribute this call. I'll head over to my soft phone, for example. We can go ahead and accept this phone.
Hi, I'm Sam calling from Talk AI, reaching out following your recent interest in AI voice agent. Can I ask what sparked your interest in outbound voice agent?
Just wondering about how I can help my sales team.
That sounds great. Improving your sales team's efficiency is a valuable goal. Could you share what your anticipated call volume is?
10,000 calls a month.
That's quite a significant volume. Thank you for sharing that. What specific application are you looking for? For example, are you interested in lead generation, lead qualification, or booking?
Specifically lead qualification and booking.
Got it? That sounds like a solid plan for your sales process. Lastly, could you provide me with your budget for this project?
$5,000.
Thank you for sharing your budget. Since it's above $3,000, we can definitely move forward with scheduling an appointment. What time do you prefer to book an appointment?
Do you have anything next Tuesday, the 18th of March?
Just a sec. On Tuesday, March 18th, we have available slots at 10:15 a.m., 12 p.m., and 4:30 p.m. Do any of those times work for you?
Let's do 4:30 p.m.
Hold on a sec. Thank you for booking with us. Your appointment is confirmed for Tuesday, March 18th at 4:30 p.m.
Booking was created. I'm using a soft phone, so it's a bit muffled there, but we'll receive an SMS shortly to the number I had called in on. What matters is that change you just saw there. We had a call to our lead. Lead status was updated to called. Our attempt was successful. For example, we didn't reach that voicemail. We have the summary of the call here. We also have our raw data analytics here, including that call I just had in the raw transcript here, as well as our recording here and all the costs associated with that call. As far as the booking side goes, I went over this in great detail last video, so I recommend checking that out before we move forward here. Although what we're talking about today can be applied across different applications of outbound sales. I'm merely using the appointment booking functionality to facilitate bookings. Really, the core concepts we're going to be discussing today is this idea of a trigger. So reading records from your CRM and distributing calls, passing in dynamic variables, including the customer name. On the end of call report side, we need to reflect what happened during that call. But here today, most importantly, we want to be discussing what happens when we reach voicemail. And that's what I'm going to get into just now. So I'm going to go ahead and change the call status back to be called. We're going to reset the attempt, and we're going to see what happens with this outbound system in the event that we do not reach the customer first try. So we'll set the status again to be called. So let's go ahead and test this workflow. Getting a call. We're going to let this ring through, and we're just going to monitor what happens in our CRM here. So that call answered there. It's going to start up the second call. As you'll see there, a live update on that voicemail attempt number 1. We're going to go through the path now on trying that second attempt a minute after the first attempt. We'll wait a minute here. And there we go. We're getting that second call. You'll see attempt 2 now logged. I'm receiving that call, and we're going to let this also ring through. Again, monitoring our attempt, and then we'll check out the execution logs after. So that call was not answered also. So after 2 attempts, no answer. And now this third call is going to be a day after at 4 p.m. But obviously for this demo, I just set it to 5 seconds. And let's wait about 5-10 seconds here. There we go. We have the third attempt going back in. Now, if I don't answer this call, we'll mark that as this is an unreachable lead. So there we go. Didn't answer all 3 of those calls. So it's pretty safe to say this lead is not answering. Of course, in production here, and what it will be set at is to call the following day at 4 p.m. So spacing out these calls. And there we see it. We have voicemail. That lead is unreachable. Now, you'll probably be wondering what this last hope button is. And this is fun, guys, but we're not going to get into that now. This will be at the end of the video, so stick around and we'll see what this mysterious little button does. And I'm sure you can probably guess what it will do. But for now, that is how the voicemail system works. Let's go ahead and check the execution logs here. So our first call, we didn't get an answer. So voicemail attempt 1, guys. Going down this path, if voicemail attempt equal to 1, let's go ahead and flag that, waiting a minute, distributing a call again, and thereafter that call, setting the attempt count to 2, which as you saw was reflected in our CRM. When we reached a voicemail on that second day, guys, again going down the voicemail path, if voicemail attempt was equal to 2, we need to wait 1 day, and then at 4 p.m. calling again for that third and final call. Again, updating the attempt count within our CRM. And finally, if that third call was not reached or was not answered, we'll go ahead and reflect that by updating our record as unreachable. As I suggested, the 1 day here, I changed to 5 seconds just for the purposes of this demo, but we'll go into the editor here, and what it will look like instead after a time interval, which I manually set here as 5 seconds, it'll be at a specific time, an expression that adds a day to now and then sets that time to what we want. E.g. 4 p.m. So now plus 1 day, set time zone. So if you're in a different time zone and you're using this template, just change this here. And we're going to set that to 16 hours. That'll be 4 p.m. According to plenty of studies, that is the optimal time zone. Hence why I've added a day and set that callback time to that 4 p.m. Now that we've gone through both scenarios in the event of an answered call and also the scenario in the event that we had a voicemail and the callback system associated with that, I think we've got a good picture. Now we can go ahead and get started with setting this up for yourself. Now this template you see here, which is the core brains behind the logic of this voicemail callback system, will be left in the description below for free. Don't worry about it, it's on me guys. But what we'll set up manually here are going to be our trigger scenario, as well as something special at the end that has something to do with this mysterious button, last hope. So stick around guys. Let's get into setting this up. So to explain exactly what we'll be going through, we firstly need an agent that can actually talk to the user. So what you heard on that first demo call when I answered that phone call. And this is set up on Vapi. Secondly, we'll need a platform where leads can be called from. As you may guess, this is set up on Airtable. Finally, we'll need those logic layers or workflows that can actually distribute these calls, logging the outcomes of each, performing our callback mechanisms, specifically in the event we do reach a voicemail. And as you guessed it, quite evidently, we'll be using N8N for that, which I'll walk you through. But first, let's jump into the start of where things really happen, and that is Vapi. Now in Vapi, the agent that we're distributing to our leads are going to be this quote unquote sales agent. So this is for outbound sales calls. What we have here is a combination of a lead qualification agent built in with appointment booking functionality. I recommend checking out this video up the top here if you haven't already. I go through in extensive detail on how to build out a live over the phone appointment booking component to connect with any sort of Vapi agent, and this demonstrates just that. So in last video it was more of an inbound agent. In this video we're doing it for an outbound sense, where I've simply just injected what I mentioned last video into this agent to facilitate booking appointments. But I digress. So what we'll do is we'll run through the scaffold and build of the agent you guys heard in that first demo. Of course, this is going to be specific to your business, your use case, your client, and so forth. But to explain things briefly, we're using firstly an OpenAI GPT-4o mini model here. We have a first message. So when I'm answering the call, we're going to say, hello, am I speaking with customer name? And I'll show you how we're passing in these dynamic variables with an outbound call shortly. So hello, am I speaking with Jonas? Now this is a basic scaffold template here. We have a role, you're Sam, an expert booking assistant and sales agent aimed at our business. The task here is to introduce the call. So telling the user, you're Sam, calling from Talk AI, my other agency where we build voice AI applications, reaching out following their recent interest in AI voice agents. And then the qualification component here is to qualify the lead, asking number one, why they were interested in reaching out about outbound voice agents. So typically with outbound lead qualification, you're going to have a lead enter their details within a contact form, following maybe a meta ad or on your website, inquiring about a specific product or solution. We're going to wait for that response. We're going to ask what is their anticipated call volume as the second qualification criteria here. Ask what application they're specifically after. For example, lead generation, lead qualification and booking, and so forth. And finally, asking their budget, which either discounts or qualifies the lead. So if the budget is under 3,000, we will not offer booking an appointment. If it is greater than 3,000, we'll go ahead and offer to schedule an appointment. And that's what you saw in that first demo where we actually booked in that appointment, and I showed you on my calendar there. As far as booking the appointment, I go through this last video. So again, checking that out. This is just injectable into any sort of system prompt for any type of agent, calling in our tools that we went over last video. Closing the call, we're using an end call function here. Got some specifics, some context here. You work at Talk AI, a leading AI development agency. You're qualifying leads via an outbound phone call that have inquired about our services. Business hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You're in a voice conversation. We're passing in the current time and a few notes there. So a basic outbound sales structure here. I'll leave this also in the description, so don't worry about that. Going over to the transcription model here, I'm using Speechmatics Here, I find it's quite good in transcription. A voice, we're using 11 Labs, and this is Muhammad. Functions, of course, we have our live appointment booking functions enabled here, but that is not a part of today's video. Really what's important here is our voicemail detection. And this is what I mentioned earlier in the video, where Vapi has now released a few different voicemail detection providers. Traditionally within Vapi, this was only Twilio, and Twilio's voicemail detection sort of worked temperamentally, which wasn't quite good in actually identifying and flagging voicemails. Now we have the option with Twilio, Google, and OpenAI. So these would be the Gemini model as well as GPT models that are sort of specifically designed to identify voicemails where they apply. So very good here. A nice and much needed feature within Vapi, I think. Now, a lot of the use cases with AI voice agents are for these outbound lead qualification applications, as well as database reactivation. So really what you're getting here in this video is quite valuable in terms of taking this to the market, and quite sellable, as these are very sought after applications currently. We can also set the expected voicemail duration based on data that you've encountered with particular voicemails for your particular outbound campaigns. This may range typically from 15 to 30 seconds. So the ideal range here is 15 to 30 seconds. I've got it set here as 15. I'm calling up myself in this outbound campaign, and often when you're calling people's phone numbers, you'll be encountering a pre-recorded voicemail message. This will be something like, hey, sorry, I can't get to the phone right now. Please leave a voicemail after the tone, beep, then silence. So 15 seconds here is quite appropriate. Other than that, there's really nothing else I've changed here except for messaging. Now, messaging here in the context of our server URL is going to be our N8N workflow. So this outbound end of call report here listens for server events or server messages, specifically end of call report, which is the only server message we're sending here. Our end of call report contains one key detail, which we can use to identify whether that call was answered, failed, or reached a voicemail or IVR machine system. And to point that out here, we're looking for specifically this name ended reason. As far as the actual agent build here, that's pretty much it. Mainly I wanted to showcase really the core concept of distributing outbound calls with AI voice agents, and that is triggering the calls. So on what event or what schedule should I trigger these calls? Secondly is actually identifying when we're reaching voicemails and when we're reaching an answered status, or alternatively, when we're reaching a failed call, so we can't connect to that number, for example. And most importantly, adding some logic that will recall our leads in the event we reach voicemail. And I'll jump into why that's really important with outbound lead qualification agents in just a moment. So I've walked through the Vapi side of things, and what you need here to set up this entire system is three things: our Vapi API key, our assistant ID, as well as our phone number ID. So if you're not familiar with connecting a Twilio phone number to your agent, I recommend learning how to do that. I'll link a video below on where I go through actually doing that. So those three things, what we want to do here is go ahead down to the side here, the left-hand side under Vapi API keys. You'll see your private key here. You want to copy this, and we'll paste this somewhere in notes, for example, for now, and we'll get back to these credentials later. So copy this, put this somewhere that we can use later. So you want your API key here, assistant. You'll want to copy your assistant ID here. At the top here, copy assistant ID and paste this in also somewhere that we can retrieve later. Third and finally, we'll need our phone number ID. So in the left-hand side here under phone numbers, you'll see your imported phone number. You'll want to copy this ID here also, and we'll leave that somewhere we can retrieve later. If you don't know how to import or get a free phone number, if you're in the US, Vapi offers free numbers here. You can just type in your area code and you'll be assigned a number. Note that we have a 10 call limit daily with these free numbers. If you're looking to distribute a few more calls than that, you'll have to import a number from Twilio or Vonage, or do some SIP trunking via Telenex, which I'm actually going to do a video next week or the following week on SIP trunking with Twilio and Telenex to get cheaper telephony. But once you have your phone number ID, we'll be good to go. The next step we'll need to do is configure our Airtable, and I'm gonna build this with you guys from scratch as well. So we're gonna start from scratch here, go ahead over to Airtable and we'll create a new base, and we'll call this whatever we want, maybe outbound system, for example, and we'll really want 2 tables, and one is going to be storing raw call analytics regardless of the outcome of the call. So in the event it was a failed call, voicemail call, answer call, we want to grab all the associated data with that call so we can determine how effective our system is by analyzing costs, minute, and so forth. So we want 2 tables here. The first table is going to be table 1. We'll rename this to data, and we'll want to create a new table from scratch, and we'll call this leads. Now, if you name these 2 tables data and leads, making sure there's no white spaces or anything. When we import the voicemail detection and callback system, all the mappings should be correct. Just follow along here on what specific columns and column names I assign to each table, just to ensure that you don't really have to remap everything I have pre-built into this voicemail callback system template. So let's begin with the data table. What we want to do here, we'll name this ID. This will be the specific call IDs associated with each call a certain phone number or agent makes. Secondly, our new column, we'll right click, insert right. We'll call this call provider ID, capital I, capital D, single line text, create field. Go ahead and right click, we'll duplicate this also, and we'll just call this one phone number ID, phone number ID, save. Go ahead, insert right, and single line text, we'll call this customer number, create field. Again, we'll insert right, and we want to call this type. So what type of phone call was this? Inbound, outbound, or a web call? For this, it's going to be outbound. We'll call this single line text, type, create field. Insert right again. We'll call this started, all single line text here. This is going to be when the date, time of when that call actually started was. Create field, and as you guessed it, we're going to create an ended, so when the call started, when the call ended. Next, we're going to do the time, so insert right here, and this is going to be a bit different. We're going to do a number here, and this is going to be milliseconds, so I've got it as double L. Milliseconds, this is going to be a number, so how many milliseconds did the call last? And the decimal places, we'll do 0, 1 here. Go ahead and create that. Next, we'll want to insert right also. This again is going to be a number, only to 4 decimal places, and this is going to be cost, STT, meaning cost speech to text. So we want to store the cost of the 3 components of a voice agent, which are speech to text, the transcription, text to speech, and the LLM. We'll go ahead and we'll actually duplicate this, duplicate field, call this cost LLM, duplicate this again, call this cost text to speech, duplicate again. I know a bit of columns here. We'll do cost total. So what's the total cost of these 3 components? And then we'll duplicate this field also. We can add a cost Twilio here if you want to store your telephony costs. Duplicate this again, and we're going to do a cost totals of everything. Now we need 3 more things. So we'll insert right, ended, space, reason. This is going to be why that call was ended. Single line text, create field, insert right. This is going to be transcript, and we're going to do this long text. So storing the transcript. I'll just delete these trail ones. And then finally, we're going to get the recording. So the recording of that call. Single line text, create field. And that's set up as far as the raw data field in your Airtable. Next, we'll quickly just configure the leads. This primary column here, we'll change this to date, space, time. This can be single line text. Insert right, this is going to be first, space, name, the first name of the lead. Duplicate this, last name, insert to right, mobile. We want to capture the mobile of the number, single line text, and then email. We'll capture also the email, and we'll actually reorder this. So we'll put status over here. This is a single select option, and we're gonna change these. And the top one we can put to in progress, so that call is in progress. And then we can do called, that lead was called, failed, and voicemail, and most importantly, to be called. I might just change these to a bit more of appropriate colors, and we'll duplicate this field also. The status copy is now going to be attempt, capital A. We'll change these attempts to #1, #2, #3, unreachable, and that should be good. So attempt 1, 2, 3, unreachable. And of course, we'll need if that attempt was successful, so we can do success. That looks good, hit save. And then we'll change this notes to summary, so the summary of the call. Because we're storing the transcript and recording in our data table, we only really want the summary here in this visual view here. Long text. We'll give it an assignee in case you want to assign team members to specific leads. And finally, we'll add the very special thing here, bonusing, I'll discuss a bit later, and that's going to be a button. So our button is going to act as a manual calling button where we can redistribute calls at will to any sort of lead that we want in our CRM. We can call this the last hope. We'll call this final call maybe, and we'll keep as open URL right now, because what we'll do later is run a script. We'll just create that field though. Okay, we'll just create a button there with some dummy data. We'll come back to this in a moment and reconfigure this. But when you have these columns set up correctly, as I just walked you through in both the leads table, the data table, and in the previous video, when we go over appointment booking, we'll have a third table called bookings. So if you're wanting to incorporate live bookings over the phone with this particular system, do check out that video, guys. But for now, as far as Airtable goes, we have our base and our two tables. So we have that set up. Now we can get into the fun stuff, building out the N8N side of things. What I'll do now is just put myself in here as a lead mobile, so we can start distributing calls at will, and we'll create this status to be called, and we'll leave everything. So put yourself as a dummy lead. Now what you can do here is there's multiple options here on how to actually import real leads into Airtable, and one would be to read new records in whatever other CRM you're using. Another option here is to import CSV, assuming that they follow the criteria of these column names, where we can import a big lead list here. And just by assigning a status to be called to a lead, the system will start by itself and start calling those leads. We now have our Vapi agent that can actually speak to a user. We also have a storage system in which we can import leads to. Now what we need is a logic layer to bring these two platforms together in one single ecosystem, and that is going to be N8N. To make a call to these leads, we need two things, which is pretty typical for outbound calls: the user's name and their number. Now, the primary advantage here of outbound AI voice agents is that idea of efficiency. Hence, we want to start making calls within less than 5 minutes of a lead entering our CRM. So to jump into N8N now, to build this out, we need to build some sort of schedule that will call these leads that fit within a certain criteria, and that criteria is if that status equals to be called. So let's jump into a new N8N workflow and build out this trigger to start reading the first name of each lead, their mobile, and only filtering by status equal to be called. Jumping over into N8N, let's build out this trigger call workflow. We'll create a new workflow, and we need to think here, when do I want these calls to be distributed? Well, we know that we want to only call leads with status TBC, but how often do we want to read Airtable and make these calls? As I suggested earlier in the video, speed to lead is key, so we want this to be sub 5 minutes. We can do this by creating a first step on a schedule down here. For this, we'll set the trigger interval to minutes, as opposed to any of these other options. We'll do 5 minutes in between triggers for now. Maybe we'll do it 1, that should be fine. We have a scheduled trigger, so when this is active, this will run once every single minute. Now that this workflow is running, we need to search records against our criteria. And simply put, our criteria is if status column and this field is equal to TBC, then we want to return those records and therefore distribute calls to using their first name and mobile. To do that, we can add a new node here and we'll search up Airtable. We want to search records. And here, similar to my previous video, we'll need to connect our credentials with Airtable. Last video, I did it via a token. And to grab that, head over to airtable.com/create/tokens/new. We can name this whatever we wish. N8N AT Airtable. We'll add a scope. Scopes for N8N Airtable modules should be read, write, as well as schema bases read. So ensuring you have these 3 scopes enabled will give it access to the base we had just created. Outbound system, create token. We can copy this token back over to Airtable, paste in our token, and we'll hit save. Now, the resource we're trying to collect is a particular record within our Airtable, and the operation here obviously is going to be searching those leads. We're going to be searching specifically from our outbound system Airtable base, e.g. this name here, and from a particular table in which our leads are stored, so leads. And we want to create a filter here that searches in a column, and where that column field is equal to 2BC will return only those leads. To do that, open bracket, open curly bracket, and status is the name of our column, close curly bracket, space equal to open string, and that's going to be TBC. Close our string, close our bracket, and right now we have return all. But given Vapi's 10 call concurrency limit, we only want to return 10 at a time. So this will run once a minute, returning 10 records at a time, ensuring that we're abiding by our call concurrency limit. This is all set up now. We can go out of this and let's go ahead and test this workflow. You'll see here our output contains 1 item, which is the lead we had just put in. Most importantly, the first name and our mobile. We want to use these or set these as values, and to do that we'll create a new node, data transformation, edit fields, setting these fields, and we'll add these fields manually starting with ID, and the value is going to be our record ID. We'll go ahead and add a new field. Next will be our first name. The value here is going to be obviously the input of our Airtable, which is first name. Let's go ahead and create a new field, and this is going to be mobile. We'll go ahead and drag in the mobile, and now we've set all these 3 fields which we need, specifically the first name and mobile to make a call to, and we'll need this ID to update a particular record that call is in progress. If I now run this, you'll see we collected the output objects ID, first name, and mobile. This is great. We can parse this directly into an HTTP module to Vapi's call endpoint to start making these calls. And remember earlier when I said to keep your Vapi API key, assistant ID, and phone number ID handy, this is where it'll come into play, and we'll be using this a few times. We'll create a new node, HTTP. We're making a post request to specifically the endpoint Vapi call. So https://api.vapi.ai/call. This is the endpoint Vapi distributes calls through, and it requires some parameters in its body to successfully distribute a call. Before we specify our body, we need to send an authorization header and confirm our content type is JSON. To do that, we'll enable send headers. We'll use fields below. The first is going to be authorization, capital A, and the value here is going to be bearer space your Vapi API key. I'll go ahead and quickly paste this in. Next, we'll add a new parameter called content, capital C, type, capital T, value application /JSON. And as far as authentication goes, we're good to go to send a request. Now we want to send a body or a payload. This includes both our customer name and our customer number, as well as our assistant ID and our phone number ID, which will be making that call. The body content type will leave as JSON, and we're gonna specify the body here, not using fields, instead using JSON. And let's just bring this up. Now, there's a few different ways that you can structure your payload to distribute a call with. We've got transient or static based assistants. Today we're going to use a static assistant, but passing in customer dynamic variables so that we can speak each user's name separately in different calls. To make reference of what I'm talking about there, if we go back into my assistant, the first message here, hello, am I speaking with customer name? This is what we'll be doing here. So we'll be passing in the name, which we retrieved from an Airtable record, and this will sit within a customer object. Firstly, we'll open curly brackets, enter, and we'll want to specify what assistant to use. And to do that, open quotes, assistant, all lowercase, capital ID, close quotations, colon, and now we want to paste in our assistant ID. But before we paste those in, I'll complete writing this out and we can paste them all in at once. So your assistant ID will sit in these X's. We'll go comma, and now we want to define the customer name and number. To do that, we'll open quote, customer, close, colon, and now these will sit within inside this open curly bracket. Specifically, we want to use customer.name, and this will pass in a moment, comma, enter, and number. So number is the most important here because we need to know what number or destination to call to, and we'll pass this in also. I'll just put XXX here for now and leave out the comma here because we'll be closing off our customer. So close curly bracket, comma, enter, and now what we'll have to do is enter phone number ID. So phone, all lowercase, capital N, number, capital ID, close quotes, colon, and this will be our phone number ID, and we can just close off this schema entirely. So this is our payload that we're sending to Vapi to create a phone call. We're calling in our assistant that we have created. We're passing in these dynamic variables, including customer.name and the number to call to, as well as what number we're calling from. Let's close out of this and we can start to use already the name and number here. Click expression and we'll get rid of the X's here and pass in the customer first name, our mobile number of the customer, right? Now what we have to do is paste in our assistant ID as well as the phone number ID, which I'll do just now. These values will remain static throughout this whole workflow, as well as the phone number ID, which I'll paste in just now. Once that's done, we're pretty good to start distributing calls to each lead. And in fact, we can test this now. Our call was successful. And now following a call, we need to append our Airtable to status in progress. So once we've called, the call will be queued, and then this means our call's in progress unless it was failed or we reached a voicemail or they answered. So sort of this limbo state in between not called and whatever that outcome was. To do that, we can go ahead, add a new node, Airtable, but this time we're going to update a record. Again, using your access token, we're going to update from the base, outbound system, list, leads, and we need to update as per the ID, which we had set in our edit fields. We can drag that in like so. And really what we're wanting to update here is this status, and we'll change that to in progress. Once we've done that, we can hit save and you're good to go as far as the trigger. So there's this idea of reading any sort of CRM for some particular values required to make an effective outbound call. Specifically here, I'm using the first name as well as the required parameter and value, which is the customer number. If we don't know where we're calling, we're not going to make a call. It's as simple as that. We're then sending that call with those values so we can have a personalized first message. We can hit save. We can go ahead and test this workflow. You'll see the call is in progress and I'm receiving a call in my soft phone. So as far as the trigger goes, we can now make calls to our leads. We'll make those calls marked as in progress. And now you're probably thinking, well, what happens after the call? E.g., how do I differentiate whether that call was answered, we reached a voicemail, or for whatever reason that call was failed? How do we start to build this out? So now that this is saved, we can go ahead into our projects and we'll create a new workflow. And now, following the link in the description, we want to import the template. So we'll go ahead and import from file and upload this into N8N, introducing you to the brains of the operation. Now, as simple as this does look, it works well. Often complexity really isn't required, specifically with handling end of call reports. It's a single server event with a limited output schema. There's really not a lot we have to work with. All we're gonna have to do here is really just map our new Airtable base with the configured ones here, and we'll change one single time zone setting, which is in this plus day wait module, and you'll be good to go. What we can do here is we'll just go ahead and speed run connecting all our Airtables to the base. The only one that's going to be different from the rest is this first raw data create record. This is going to point to our data table where we're storing all that essential information. So let's jump in here. We'll remap the base to outbound system, remap the table to data. Remap the table to data. And because we've set this up similar to how the template should expect these values to send, we don't have to remap any of these, which is very handy and time saving for you guys. So once you select your base and table, you'll be good to go. We can get out of this module and now we'll start doing it for the rest. So this top line here is if the call was answered, and I'll run you through these conditionals here. So if the ended reason of the call, and I'll make reference to the Vapi documentation, we have a range of call ended reasons, and only a few of these would occur in the event that call was actually answered. So what we're doing in N8N is we're excluding all these values that sit outside of the ended reason event, which would occur if that customer did answer. So we're saying if ended reason is not equal to customer did not answer, assistant error, pipeline error, bunch of pipeline error, phone call provider closing, failed to connect a call, unknown reason, voicemail, leave a message. Particularly these two at the bottom, we're using the summary of the call to also double check against voicemails. In the event that the ended reason doesn't sit within one of these and falls through the cracks, we're checking the summary to ensure that it doesn't contain these keywords like voicemail or leave a message, which is very common for each voicemail box. So if any of these conditions are not met, then we're going down this true path. We're going to return the record ID in which that call originated from and update that record with status called and then attempt was successful. So we'll go through here and connect our Airtable. Again, restructuring the base from list outbound system, from list leads, and we're filtering here in each of these search Airtable records. If our mobile equals to the mobile we received in our end of call report, we're checking if that mobile is equal to the mobile contained in our Airtable. And because we cannot distribute a call without this mobile field, this will always be true or return a record. And that's what we're doing just here. We're saying if mobile column is equal to the end of call report customer number, then return that record, in which we can use that record ID to update the record with the time and the status to called as well as attempt to success. And then we're going to include the call summary here. So again, we're going to change the base to our one, outbound system, again, clicking leads. And if you followed me with creating our Airtable, this will be the same for you. We do not have to remap any of these values. Go ahead and click it out of that. And I'm just going to do the same for the rest of these. So once these are all mapped, we can change just one final thing, which are these two call distributions. Now, I'll quickly go back to the start here, where if any of those conditionals were not met, then we proceed down the path that the call was actually answered. If any of those were met, we know it's either a voicemail or a failed call, and specifically we're going to filter out with those. So if the end of call report was equal to voicemail, customer busy, customer did not answer, or customer ended call, that is true, and we'll go down this voicemail recall path. Specifically, we need to first check whether our attempt was empty. The first time we call, the status will update if we hit a voicemail to voicemail, but our attempt will be 0 or it will be empty. So in the event that it does not exist, e.g. we're on attempt 1, we need to go down this true path, which will set the attempt to 1, wait 1 minute, recall the lead, and then update our attempt number to 2. So it'll go 1, we'll call them, and then it'll go 2. If that's false, we need to check if that attempt was equal to 2. If it was equal to 2, then we're going to redistribute a call the following day. So adding 1 day, calling that lead, and updating the record to attempt 3. Now, if after this call, this conditional is not met, e.g. we're on attempt 3 or greater, it's gonna update the record with unreachable. If we just quickly jump into this 1 day wait node here, one thing you'll need to change based on your time zone is simply this Australia, Sydney. So change it to your time zone. Again, if you're EST, this will be America/New_York. We're setting the hour to 4 p.m. a day following the time now. Now this third and final branch down here is if the call wasn't answered, and also if the ended reason didn't contain those tags that would indicate a voicemail, it must be a failed call. So we'll get the record ID and append our status to failed, and we'll be able to see this within our CRM, and we can go through, check that all the details are correct, and then rechange our status once the error is remedied to be called, and we'll start to call again. Now, we're just gonna have to change these HTTP modules specific to your agent. And to do that, we'll go ahead, click into these, making sure the method is post, URL api.vapi.ai/call. We're sending headers similar to what we did in the trigger module, authorization, bear or space your API key, content type, application, JSON. And finally, you'll wanna change your assistant ID here to the assistant ID we have in Vapi, pasting that in, as well as your phone number ID that you've imported into Vapi that we can use over here. We'll repeat this step with call #3, and when that's all mapped out, you'll be good to go. You have the core infrastructure equipped with recall action, which greatly reduces your voicemail rate and therefore increases your conversion rate. So what does all this mean, and why am I showing you this? Why is this valuable? Well, in the dozens and dozens and dozens of outbound campaigns I've run, your typical voicemail rate with outbound calling is anywhere from 40 to 70%. So that means out of every 1,000 calls, you're only really having a connected call conversation with 300 to 600 leads. This means naturally your success rate is lower. Now, what this system does is quite brilliant. We've found our voicemail rates to reduce considerably if we call them a total of 3 times. The second call just 1 minute after the first call in the event of a voicemail. And the third, the following day at a studied optimal call time of 4 p.m. And that's exactly what this system does, given to you free below as a template that you can freely use. I've explained how each path works and how we're differentiating answered, voicemail, and failed calls, and that is it to explain how this operates. We have our trigger that is going to trigger calls to leads that sit within our CRM. And then we have our end of call voicemail callback system, as well as raw data store and appropriate call tagging. Now, I'm gonna quickly run this. We'll go ahead and hit save up here. We're gonna run the whole system, test everything's working smoothly, and we'll be good to go. I have 2 more bonus items that I'm gonna show you guys now after we run this. Just making sure you have your webhook here. You need to copy your test URL if you're testing the workflow, And if you activate this workflow, you'll be using the production URL. I'm just gonna use the test URL here. You'll need to copy this URL. This is the server URL that we're sending the end of call report to. So this will be set within Vapi. And to do that, heading back over to your Vapi assistant, under advanced, scrolling down till you see messaging, and your server URL will paste that webhook in like so. And the server messages, making sure to only be sending that end of call report. Let's go ahead and run the system, making sure everything works. Of course, I'm not gonna be able to show you this plus 1 day. In the previous demo I showed you at the start of this video, we just changed it to after 5 seconds to ensure it's all working. You won't have to worry about that, but for peace of mind, saving, and we're gonna go ahead and test this workflow. Okay, so here in my lead list, we'll change the status back to TBC, meaning this lead is available to call. We'll go ahead and test our workflow. Let's go ahead and first answer this call. Receiving a call, we'll go ahead and accept. Hello.
Hi there, I'm Sam calling from Talk AI, reaching out following your recent interest in AI voice agents.
Cool. Yeah, that's sweet. We'll go ahead, end that call and test this workflow. So this is for an answered call. Boom, works perfectly. Let's check called success summary, and our data table is populated. Cool. Perfect. Now we're gonna go ahead and test this for the voicemail. Let's reset this to TBC, remove this attempt. And by the way, you might wanna change that to hashtag unreachable. We'll go ahead, test this again. Test workflow. Getting a call, we'll let this ring through. Yep. Call rang through to voicemail. Now we're gonna check this middle path here for voicemail 1, and it's gonna set the attempt count. There we go. It's gonna set our attempt count. It's waiting 1 minute. If we go back here, we'll see voicemail status 1, attempt 1. Let's wait a minute, and then it's gonna redistribute the call. And if I don't answer the second call, this will go down this path and wait 1 day, which in the demo at the start of the video, I changed this so this works. What I'll do after the second call is actually change it to attempt 3 manually, just to see if it's going down the unreachable path correctly. So while it's waiting, and if you have multiple calls, this will backlog the items. So you'll have a log of items, and if this is active, you'll still be able to process normal calls or continuously process calls, even if a lot of records are waiting or in a minute and waiting for the next day. So there we go, we have the second call incoming here. Now I'll let this ring through and you'll see we're on attempt 2, but to skip having to wait a day, I'm just gonna put this to attempt 3. And we'll run this again, and this will go down the unreachable path. Perfect, outbound system, unreachable. Those 2 calls were added in our data store here, so we're not missing any data. We have unreachable. Now you may be wondering, what happens when a lead is unreachable? I want to manually call them maybe in a week. And this is the first bonus item we're going to jump into, guys. So this button, Last Hope, is a Last Hope call button where we're going to manually call that lead regardless of the attempt outcome. So how do we do this? We can do this actually internally, or 50% within Airtable itself, and then build out a simple webhook call flow within N8N to actually make that call. So how exactly do we do this? Now, to run scripts within your Airtable, we need to go to extensions, and we'll add an extension called script, specifically scripting. If we add this, we'll be able to paste in a JavaScript, for example, that sends a particular record's values, e.g. their name and number, externally to a webhook and then distribute the call that way. The difference here is we can manually click the button directly within Airtable, so not having to wait for a schedule or configure too much in N8N. So this is a really cool and nifty tool that I came up with. So I hope for whoever's still following with this bonus piece that you enjoy. We'll go ahead, hit get started. We'll start from scratch. We can just delete all this. And I've got a script below under the folder bonus material, and we're gonna paste that in here. What we're doing here is we're getting our base table records, e.g. leads, and this is also why the table names is important if you do want to follow along with this. We're going to retrieve all records from our table. We're going to map our records to an array of objects. So we're going to get the first name and the mobile, which are those two values that we need to make a call. And we're going to send those values as a payload to a webhook URL. And then we're going to wait for the webhook response externally in our N8N and display that response data message. So we're going to say something like call success. All we're going to have to configure here is changing this webhook URL. But before we change that directly within Airtable, let's jump back over to N8N and quickly build this out. So in a new workflow, I've duplicated our trigger workflow because the HTTP request will be the same. What we're going to do here is we're going to remove this trigger. We're going to add a first step on webhook call, and this will be post. This will be a post method, and we're going to copy this test URL and put that back in our Airtable script, pasting that in here. Let's jump back over to N8N. This is going to act as our trigger. We can delete this, and we'll delete this. We'll keep these, and we'll delete this also. So we're going to keep this. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into this webhook, listen for live test events, and then back in our script, we're just going to quickly run this. And you'll see a message populate here, workflow has started. And we'll see what we received is first name, mobile, ID. This is perfect. We can use this similar to how we triggered a call in the first place. So we can take these values and we'll plug them directly into our HTTP request. So in this payload, we'll take the first name from our webhook and also the mobile from our webhook. This is really cool, guys. Assistant ID and phone number ID is going to remain static. Let's get out of this. And now that's connected, what we can do here is add a webhook response. Respond to webhook, leave this as is. And now we'll change this first initial webhook to using respond to webhook node. Enable that, and what we're going to do here is, and this is up to you whether you want to reflect this change or this call on your Airtable, but for the purposes of keeping things short and sweet, I won't add that here. Basically, we're going to receive some object data, name and number. We're going to pass that in to distribute a call similar to what we were doing in the first trigger workflow, and then we're going to respond to that webhook with a success message. And talking about a success message, we can do respond with a custom JSON body, and we'll call this results call success, right? We're going to send this result back to our Airtable to let the user know that this was successful. Save this, and now that we have our script ready here, let's just go outside, and it's in our extension. We'll click out of this and we'll just reconfigure this final call button here. Calling it last hope is pretty funny. Can set the style whatever you want, but instead our action we're going to change to run script, and that script is going to be the dashboard one scripting we had just created. So hit save on that one, and now hypothetically, if I run this workflow, we're waiting for that event, and we click our little button here, the script will run and our lead's going to be called again, and bang, there you go. We're getting another call, and the end of call report will populate also. So if I were to run our end of call workflow here, it'll be defined as unreachable. And there we go, unreachable. So a really cool little feature here, a little bonus material from you guys. And the reason you might want to do this is there's some particular leads within your database or CRM that even after 3 calls, you may want to hit them back with a manual call a week from now. And the reason I do this in a button with a little script specific for each record is because it may not be the case that you want to redistribute calls to the entirety of your list that was unreachable. Maybe you know a few leads in there that you're like, okay, I'm never gonna reach them, and you wanna do it manually. This makes it so much easier to have this system all contained within Airtable. And that's really why I'm purporting using Airtable for outbound campaigns. Now, that was a lot today, and I'm still not done. You may be thinking, why am I collecting this data here? It's very ugly. What if I want a dashboard? Now you can create a dashboard with scripting similar to what we did with the button there directly within Airtable, and that's something you may want to do. But what if we want to bill people for these dashboards? What if we want to bill as an add-on for our clients to view this in a nice graphical format? It's sort of hard to do without the technical expertise with scripting inside Airtable. So a quick workaround and a new feature that Vapi has just released is this native integration with ChatDash. ChatDash is a white labeled client dashboard platform designed for AI agent agencies. So if you're looking on how to set this up, head over to ChatDash and log in, sign up, and you'll be prompted with this onboarding screen where we can set up the domain of our white label dashboard, connecting our Vapi agent, creating different clients that can log in to this dashboard and view agent analytics, and then we'll review this. So I'll go through step by step, sort of setting this up and how to integrate both Vapi and ChatDash, and you'll see what it looks like. We can go ahead and hit next, and this is pertaining to your domain and branding. We can add an agency name, an agency logo. I just made it an ugly picture of myself. I don't know if that would upload. And then we can add our domain. So this will be configurable in your DNS settings where you can add a sort of a sub page to your main domain that you might want to attach here. Otherwise, the native domain will be agency or whatever you put in this text here, .chat-dash.com, and we can add that. I'm not gonna set up the domain here. We can add a color theme here. Let's go purple, where your buttons change, hit next. And where it says select your chatbot platform, we want to connect Vapi. And the chatbot name is basically your agent. So outbound agent 1. And mind you, we can add multiple chatbots or agents here. All we'll need is our Vapi API key as well as the assistant ID, which I'll paste in now. And we can add chatbot down the bottom here. We can hit next. And now we're gonna create a client for the dashboard where our agent sits, and we can give them a name, a login ID, email and password. So for this one, I'm gonna name it myself, and we've got a password here. I'm just gonna quickly copy so I don't forget. Create client down the bottom here, and we'll finish. This is gonna initialize your dashboard. We can hit get started. We'll exit out of this. And what you're seeing here is the admin side. So this isn't your client dashboard. This is your master dashboard where you can see how many clients are on your account, how many chatbots you have. Now, the plan here is $35 a month. I'm using the free plan here. You can also do direct billing within this platform, which is really cool. Of course, we'll see the client I just created myself, the chatbot, some templates here. Really a nice platform to use as an additional add-on for a cool little platform you can offer to your clients, or even for yourself if you're just interested in looking at your analytics in a nice UI. What I'm going to do now is head over to the client dashboard I had created and walked you guys through, and we'll see how that looks. This is connected up to the agent I've been calling throughout this video. let's go ahead and visit that. You'll see a nice little login screen here. And I got my logo up here. It's just a picture of me. Sign in, and this is what it looks like. Pretty cool. You'll see our total call minutes, and we can change the date range that we're querying the analytics by. I've only been using this number today, so we have 20 call minutes. You'll see the number of calls, reason, ended call, and a cool feature here outside of the analytics page is the conversations. We can see via text format here all the conversations we were having today, and we can listen to these recordings. We can add a note, failed, which is pretty cool. We can save this for later, mark as reviewed, delete. We can get conversation summaries, success evaluations for all the conversations we've been having. And mind you, this is what your client would be looking at, all under your branding. There's no mention of Vapi, so a cool little offering that you guys can do. We have a knowledge base that we can add here as well, and this pertains to sort of integrating with templates you set up on your admin dashboard. And this was added quite recently with Vapi's V2 dashboard. A lot of other features were added to Vapi just recently, and it'd take a while to get through everything. But for today, we were able to create quite a unique, almost infrastructure behind Vapi outbound sales calling. So that is it for today. A big video. This took me a while to get right, and honestly, over the past year I've been in the space, this is what I found to be the most user-friendly in terms of client usage and overview on what's going on with their agent, as well as internally tracking everything, making sure leads are being called. You're not getting a high voicemail rate. You're getting proper good conversion rates. As I mentioned earlier, is directly integratable with the live appointment booking functionality I built in last video. So you have both an inbound infrastructure and now an outbound infrastructure that you can use at your will, all for free, guys. Templates below. Specifically, this middle really core component of the whole system will be below. All right, guys, that is it for today. If you found this video useful, please do leave a like and comment below. It helps me out. Again, if you're looking to stay ahead of the AI curve, do hit that subscribe button. There are plenty more videos like this to come in the future. So if you don't want to miss out, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. But that is it for today, guys. Until next week.